He's not the kind of guy who, when I walk in, he's not going to say, "How you doing, fat ass?"
Yeah, it's the kind of doctor you want, eh? Fucking Christ. Okay, Russ,
Okay,
let's do
let's
this.
rock and roll.
Hey, Russ, thanks for doing this.
No problem, Dan. What's going on?
So we're gonna do our 5 blends with Russ Willett, the master blender. Would you call yourself a sommelier? Can you do that, or just a blender?
Um, yeah, no, I'm a blender. The thing about a sommelier is that they're choosing items for other people to drink.
Well, so are you.
No, I'm making them. I'm not choosing them. But if people ask my opinion, I'll give it to them. Sure.
Because if King Charles invites you over, and you're going to be knighted or something, and you're next to Jacques Pepin, the master chef and one of the greatest sommeliers ever, and then there's Russ Willett, and they go through titles, and your title is I'm a blender.
Yeah, Jacques and I are friends on Facebook, by the way.
Are you?
Yeah,
I love that guy, man. I love him.
I do too. He's got a wonderful palate.
Absolutely.
But the thing that sommeliers do that I do to some degree is they tend to help you pick out what's going to go well with the meal you selected. And what I have done a lot of is pairings with tobaccos and drinks. So I do that quite a bit. So I guess in that regard, I am.
Yeah,
Like
of
a
course. I
sommelier.
mean, after every meal, I love to have a smoke because that's for some reason it's just wonderful. And I just when I'm eating, then I think, okay, so what am I gonna have now? Because of
Yep.
this meal, ba ba ba. And actually, yesterday I had a Viprati. I'm
Okay.
not trying to stroke your ego here. I'm just telling you, I had a Viprati because I even forgot what I had, but it went really well with the Viprati. Okay, so Russ, I want to talk about what the components are, how it's made, the expected smells from the tin, also the expected smells when it burns.
Hmm.
You know anybody in the company? And here we go. So
Okay.
my first one actually is an oldie. I don't know how old. Maybe you can enlighten me on this. Presbyterian, and as a matter of fact, Presbyterian just put out a new aromatic blend, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, an aromatic, and there's another one coming. They're limited editions.
Oh,
But
okay.
the original
That's what I'm
has
talking about, the original.
gone through a couple of versions. Um, it's mostly Virginias. And the big thing over the and Orientals. And the big thing over the years was, does it have any Latakia in it or not? And I can tell you definitively the answer is yes, it does, but it's a very small amount.
Because
It's
there is a smoky
Yeah,
factor in that.
and it's there just to add another layer of flavor, but not enough to dominate the blend by any means.
Would you call it in English?
I don't like that terminology at all.
How come?
Because it's very confusing, and that has changed over the years. Originally, the definition of an English blend was a tobacco that either had minimal flavorings added or only ones that were approved by the crown.
Really?
Yeah, so even something along the lines of a straight Virginia
Could
could
have been
be,
in
if
English.
It could have been in English if it wasn't heavily topped. And so that's why I don't like the terminology. But generally, the definition of an English today is a Latakia forward blend where Virginias are the secondary note, and there may be Orientals, but if there are, they're in the background.
I thought it was for sure there were Orientals in an English.
No, it
Oh,
can
okay.
just be Virginias and Latakia, but
Okay.
Virginias are definitely the secondary note.
Okay. So I
Where
mean,
a Balkan is the opposite. Latakia is the dominant note. Orientals are the secondary note. Virginias are in the background if they're there.
okay. So, like you said, you don't like that terminology. So when
No,
you're talking to when you're talking to experts like yourself, you're talking to Pear, or you're talking to um, Cornell and Deal. What's his name?
Jeremy.
Jeremy. Okay, Jeremy. Um, do you guys talk like you say English, or are you more specific?
No, we definitely get more into detail. So we'll say that it's medium bodied Latakia blend um, with a strong Oriental influence, um, and we'll talk specifically about whether we use red or bright Virginia or stoved or brown. You
Okay,
know,
okay.
so we get into a lot more detail when we're talking amongst ourselves.
Okay, so if I'm a wannabe blender and I'm hanging around with you guys and I say, yeah, I like this English and I like that English, right away you're gonna know I'm full of poop.
No, we're just going to know that you're a consumer more than you are in the
Look at
industry.
that, eh? That's so cool. Okay, okay. So the Presbyterian. How old is the Presbyterian?
Well, I know a lot of Presbyterians, and some of them are really old. You know, there's some that are younger. But in this particular case, I think it goes back to, and you know, I can't keep all the details straight, but I think it goes back to like the 30s,
That's it.
maybe further back than that. I'm not sure. Again, it's been a long time since I've looked into the background on these, but you know, Virginias and Orientals are the primary focus. Doesn't have a strong aroma. You definitely can tell in the aroma that there's a hint of Latakia, and you can tell it on the palate. The people who deny that it's in there, I don't know what they're tasting. I really don't. It's
Wow.
to me it's fairly obvious it's in there, but then again, you know, I when I'm smoking something, I'm picking it apart.
Yeah, I know. I understand. You can't help but do that. That's your. That's you. That's you.
Yeah,
You know.
it's what I do. So
So it's what it comes naturally to you.
yeah, I can't divorce myself from that when I'm
I know. I
lighting
know.
up a
I know.
pipe.
Who
But
makes it? Oh, I'm sorry, Russell. Were you going to say
Planta,
more?
Planta,
Planta.
Planta
And
makes it now.
where is Planta?
Germany.
Who's the main blender there?
I have no idea now. And whoever came up with Presbyterian's been gone a long time.
Yeah, you're right. And so when do you know anybody at that company?
No.
Are they a snooty company? What, they don't want to talk to you?
No, they're not a snooty company. They don't have a big presence in the US.
But it's a big seller, isn't it?
Presbyterian, moderate. It's a good seller, but they don't have a lot of their product line here in the U.S. Um,
What do you mean their product line? I only thought they had one tobacco plus the
oh no,
liquor.
no, they make a bunch of other tobaccos,
Okay.
but we haven't carried them for a while on our site because they weren't available in the US at all. Now some of them are available, but frankly, people have forgotten about them. And
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, exactly. That sort of thing. But I don't know anyone with that company.
So what do we get in the tin smell of that?
It's you're mostly getting the sweet and sour of the combination of Virginia and Orientals.
Okay.
Um, it's not a terribly fragrant tobacco until it's lit. It doesn't have a huge tin note, but it's very mature. You know, you get that deeper sweetness from the Virginias because the Virginias are matured, and the Orientals definitely add a little spice to the mix.
So what kind of person would go for this type of tobacco? A seasoned smoker or a beginning smoker?
I would lean more toward a seasoned smoker for a few reasons. A seasoned smoker tends to sip their tobaccos, and that's really important with a blend like um, Presbyterian, where there's a lot of Virginia in the blend. Otherwise, you're going to fry your mouth if you
Yeah.
puff on it furiously. So, and you have to have a taste for nuance because this is a nuanced tobacco.
So you'd call it a deep tobacco?
No, I wouldn't call it deep. The flavor is not deep. The flavor is interesting. It's complex, but it doesn't have a lot of bass note.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, it's only got a hint of Latakia. So it's more of a mid-range and high-end blend in terms of if we're looking at it on the flavor spectrum. It's going to be the brighter flavors to the mid-range with only a little hint of bass.
So it doesn't pass the tenor, eh?
I would call it a lyric baritone.
That's great. I love it, man. Yeah,
And,
I
and,
get it.
and the reason it's a lyric baritone is because I'm a lyric baritone.
I see, I see.
You know, just above that,
Yeah,
if it didn't have any real bass to it, you would kind of move it toward heroic tenor.
heroic.
Yeah. Heroic tenors are tenors in the lower end of the vocal range, and the lyric baritones are in the higher end of the baritone range.
Oh, I didn't know about the heroic. Yeah, I just learned something, man.
And so those are the that's where it kind of lives in the mid to upper range of flavors in terms of
Okay.
depth.
I mean, and what? Does a steak go good with that? Does fish and chips? You know?
I don't smoke while I'm eating.
Oh, for God's sakes.
Uh,
Uh,
what drink would it go well with?
sure, go ahead.
Okay. I would say it would go really well.
What a John Adams,
John Adams,
a beer, the Boston beer, Boston.
Sam
Ah,
Adams.
I was close.
Yeah. Yeah, the Boston Lager. Yes.
See?
Boston Lager would be a good one.
All righty. Okay, so let's go on to the next one.
Okay.
The Peterson's Nightcap, formerly known as the Dunhill Nightcap, which
Yep.
was one I used to smoke all the time. But since I started getting into Virginias a lot, it was heavy for me. So a Nightcap, okay. Do you want to talk about the Dunhill one, or do you want to talk about the Peterson one? And does it make a difference?
They're the same damn thing.
Okay.
Because toward the end of the Dunhill run, they were being made by STG in Assens, Denmark. And all that happened at the end was STG made a deal
With
to buy when Peterson sold the pipes end of the business to Laudisy. STG bought the rights to the Peterson name, and then they made a deal with Dunhill to buy the rights to the names of the blends and to continue making the blends exactly as they had made it before. But they put the Peterson name on it because Dunhill didn't want their name attached anymore.
And is there a huge amount of money exchanged in all of this?
Well, I don't know. I'm at the lower level of STG. I'm not privy to the.
And you're the blender, for God's sakes.
Well,
Anyway,
I'm a blender on this side of the pond. We have other blenders on the other side of the pond.
so Nightcap.
Yep.
What components are in Nightcap?
Latakias, Orientals, Virginias, and Perique.
And Perique. So, okay, because now I feel foolish calling it in English, but in layman's term, this is in English.
Yeah, in layman's terms, it's in English. This is the bass drum, the viola, it's the trombone.
So it's the bottom end, eh?
Yeah. I mean, it's very, very deep. It has a significant amount of latakia in it. The Virginias are more matured, so they don't bring a trumpet. They bring more of a French horn.
Okay.
The Orientals are there. They tend to be more of the bitter rather than spicy, or the sour
And what
rather
leaf would
than
be the bitter
spicy.
one? What leaf would constitute that bitterness?
Like Smyrna would be one,
Smyrna, eh? Okay.
or Izmir, which are very similar. It's just a matter of where they're grown.
Okay.
But they're not super spicy, but they definitely have a certain depth to them that a lot of Orientals don't. And of course, the Perique definitely brings it into the base area.
So what's rounding it out? The Virginias?
Well, the Virginias and the Orientals definitely rounded out. And the purpose, I think, of the Perique is twofold. I think they're using African Virginias. And the reason I say that is Nightcap has a pretty good kick to it.
Yeah.
Now, Latakia doesn't.
Right.
Orientals don't. Perique has an unusual effect that I'll mention, but the latakia, or the nicotine, needs to come from somewhere, and African Virginias tend to be higher in nicotine. So I think that's the nicotine component, is African Virginias. What Perique does is it doesn't particularly have a lot of nicotine itself. It's kind of in the mid-range, but it creates a more alkaline smoke, and that means that your mouth and tongue can absorb more of the nicotine.
Oh, okay.
When your mouth has an acidic atmosphere, it will absorb nicotine more slowly. But an alkaline atmosphere will allow it to absorb more readily. And so, if there's a decent amount of nicotine in the Virginias, the Perique will facilitate you being able to get that. For as deep as it has a remarkable deep sweetness, kind of a prune or maybe dried fig type of sweetness.
And where's that coming from? The Perique?
That's the Perique.
And okay, psychologically, why did they call it nightcap? Like it's your last smoke.
Exactly. One of the things that a lot of people like to do is to pick a very heavy nicotine laden smoke at the end of the day, because once the nicotine hits you, it it relaxes you. And so a lot of people will do that for their last smoke of the day or right after a meal, because it is a very relaxing feel.
And I thought nicotine makes your heart beat faster.
It's very interesting what nicotine does. Um, in a modest amount, yes, it kind of picks up your heart rate, picks up your alertness. In more significant amounts, it
Like a bowl
tends,
full, like a bowl full.
like a bowl full. At the end, it tends to be very calming and soothing. And I don't know the chemistry behind it,
Okay.
but I'm certainly not the only one who notices
And what kind of meal would you have preceding that?
that. Something pretty spicy, I would go with, and the
Spicy?
reason the reason I would go with something spicy is because Nightcap doesn't have a lot of spice. It's mostly smoky and sweet. So you want to have a rich meal that has some spice to contrast what you're going to smoke.
Mm.
So you get a better taste of
Hmm.
what's actually in the blend. So something like a nice earthy chili
Mm.
beforehand would be a real good choice.
And would you smoke that in a medium pipe or a big pipe?
Chili? Oh no, I never smoked chili in the pipe. Nightcap, I would go actually medium to larger, and that sounds counterintuitive, but the reason is because of the latakia and perique content. It can be hard to keep lit. So a wide open bowl like a 7/8 inch chamber in a pot is a great pipe for smoking Latakia blends, because more oxygen gets into the pipe. So the pipes tend to stay lit better that way.
Okay. Okay.
So, 3/4 inch to 7/8 inch chamber. Um, but I wouldn't necessarily go a very deep pipe. Like
Like
I'm,
what?
I'm, I'm not
A
going to
seven?
go I'm not going to go with, an Ashton Magnum to smoke
Okay.
Nightcap. Otherwise, I won't wake up for 2 or 3 days.
What about like a 7L, a 326, I think it is?
The 320 author,
Yeah. Like it looks like a tomato bowl.
yeah, that's the author. 320. Um, that typically comes in a 3/4 inch chamber, so that would be fine.
Okay.
And
Okay.
and because it's a little more squat, that's better. So there's not quite as much tobacco in the pipe.
Okay. And you were just off topic here. You mentioned that Ashton Magnum. Like, why do they make pipes like that for people who take trips, car trips that take 25 hours?
There are some people who just love to do other things while they're smoking a pipe, and they want a good long smoke.
What's a long smoke? 3 hours?
Hour and a half, 2 hours or more.
Oh, really? Okay. So having a Partagas Lusitania is a way longer smoke than having an Ashton bowl.
Yeah, it depends. It
Mm,
depends. I mean, some of those magnums you'd get more than a couple of hours out of.
really, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, so we did talk about the components. Peterson makes it, and Is it STG that makes it, or is it Peterson's that make it?
Peterson for tobacco is owned by STG.
STG. Okay. And I guess that's that. I mean, you know the guys at STG,
I do.
right? And I guess a seasoned smoker would be smoking this, right?
Yeah, this is definitely not something I would smoke in the first 6 months of smoking a pipe.
6 months, for
I
God's
might
sake.
give it I might give it a try at 6 months in a smaller pipe, but I would definitely want to have a little more air under my wings
Yeah.
uh, before I smoke Nightcap.
Yeah, I'm a little chicken poop. I would have won a couple of years, but what can I say? Okay, you know what? Since we're on the Peterson train, let's do the opposite. Early Morning Pipe by Dunhill Peterson STG. My take on that is that that's a relatively substantial smoke, I find, and they call it early morning pipe. Am I mistaken? So, what's in early morning pipe? What type of blend is this?
Okay, it's again a Latakia Virginia Oriental blend. The Virginias are a little more prominent in early morning. They call it early morning. To me, that's a little inaccurate.
Mm.
To me, it's more of a medium-bodied smoke.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this is definitely more of the lower tenor range.
Okay. Okay.
But you do get a lot of complexity from the Virginias working with the Latakia, and the Orientals are there. They kind of weave their way in and out as you smoke it. Has a very vegetal, smoky tin note, and the
Is it bitter?
flavor.
Is it
No,
bitter?
I wouldn't say bitter. I would say sweet with a hint of sour, and definitely smoke. There's definitely smoke there.
Yeah.
So, but to me, it's medium bodied. It's not overpowering in terms of nicotine. Has a good solid flavor, and it doesn't have a super long finish. Nightcap has a long finish.
And why does it have a long finish? Because of the Latakia?
Yeah, the Latakia, the smokiness lingers on your palate. Early morning pipe is a little bit cleaner because it's got a lot more Virginia in it, and it tends to fade a little bit more quickly. But the room note is definitely smoky, but there's kind of an herbal character along with the smoke.
And that's because of the Orientals?
Yeah, a combination of the Orientals and Virginias.
And so it's not the polar opposite then of Nightcap.
The name would suggest that, but no, it's not.
Right.
It's kind of the brighter, happier younger brother.
Right. And it's funny because psychologically, I used to smoke early morning pipe a lot. I used to smoke a lot of Dunhills, and I would smoke it in the morning, and I'd get a kick out of it though, because I just have a toast and a coffee, and then it's like bam, ooh,
Yeah, I mean, on an empty stomach, early morning pipe still got a pop to it.
So what? Would you do this in the morning, or is this an afternoon smoke? Because you're saying it's a low tenor?
Yeah, for me, yeah, I can smoke it in the morning, but a lot of times in the morning I'll smoke what I'm wearing today, Warhorse.
I just ordered a tin. I don't know if I forget if I ordered the green one or the red one, but I have to try it. I gotta try it.
Don't stand up immediately after finishing a bowl.
Of either green or red.
It's the same tobacco blend. The only difference is the top dressing.
Okay. Well, I'm scared. I'm scared of getting sick, man. But I've been smoking for years. For God's
Yeah,
sake.
just make sure you don't puff hard. Have something to drink with it, and don't smoke it on an empty stomach. You'll be fine.
So something to drink. Well, what would you drink with the early morning pipe?
With early morning pipe,
A bourbon? A sweet bourbon? A rye?
bourbon might overpower it a little bit. Maybe a rye would be better because
Or
it's
an Irish whiskey?
Irish whiskey. Yeah. Maybe like an añejo rum.
That's really light, man.
Not an añejo. We're talking
Oh,
about
a rum. Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that would go well with it. In terms of wine, I would go with maybe a sweeter red. Maybe one that would go really well with it, I think, would be a Lambrusco. Slightly effervescent, slightly sweet, and very much of a grape character to it.
A Lambrusco, eh?
Yep.
It's been. I can't even taste it. I must have. I hope I've tried it, but anyways. So I mean, and the pipe smoker that would go for this, can a novice go for this early morning pipe?
They could, as long as they don't puff like a chimney.
And what bowl size? Small, medium, large?
For a beginner, I would lean toward a smaller bowl. I think early morning is best in an average size chamber.
Average size chamber, eh?
Yeah, 3/4 inch.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the next one. And this, you know what, is for me, it's a Saturday type tobacco. It's just like that. It's just like the Savinelli, the Brunello flake. For me, it's a Saturday smoke. It's like watching cartoons or listening to your favorite record, this and that. And about Savinelli's Brunello flake, it's got a bite, huh?
Depends on how you smoke it.
Okay, so I'm not eating well with it. Okay, so the one we're going to talk about is I don't know if it's Gowith and Hogarth or Samuel Gowith, but it's Bob's Chocolate Flake.
Bob's Chocolate Flake is Gowith and Hogarth.
Gowith and Hogarth. Okay.
Yeah, it's predominantly those typical Virginias that they use. A real light hint of Latakia in it.
Okay.
And there is cocoa in the top dressing.
Okay.
But it also contains some of the more typical Lakeland type flavors too. So
it does. Just a tad, I think, right?
Yeah. Just so that you do note that slightly floral or herbal note, but that's in the background. The chocolate's there, but it's not like it jumps out and yells chocolate at you.
Right. Mm.
I find it to be a nice, comforting smoke. Again, I would consider it a medium-bodied in terms of the strength of flavor. It's not, it's not beating the bass drum. It's not a piccolo.
No.
It's right in the middle. Has a fair nicotine kick to it.
This is African Virginias, right?
African Virginias once again. But they're so heavily matured that a lot of the sting that people get from Virginias isn't there.
That's right.
If you take a flake like um, capstan,
Right.
for example,
The blue one or the yellow one?
either one.
All right.
And if you're relatively new to pipe smoking, that's definitely going to dance on your tongue.
That's gonna
Because,
fry you, man.
yeah, you're not going to know how to smoke it. You could puff at a modest pace, a moderate pace with Bob's chocolate flake, and you're not going to fry your mouth.
Now, it takes a longer amount of drying time. Most of Gowitz and Hogarths or Samuel Gowitz, they take there's a preparation to these tobaccos. You just don't put it in your pipe and push it in because it's going to be like a wet Kleenex type thing. So, how long do you dry it out? Do you dry it out?
I dry it out for about half an hour to 45 minutes or
Do
so.
you, and do you rub it really, really well, or do you leave it, like a broken flake?
Um, no, that one I can rub out. Um, it helps a little bit to keep it lit. So I do tend to rub out Bob's chocolate flake. Uh, See, the thing is that they do a lot of hot pressing.
Okay.
They use a steam jacket around the mold when they press the tobaccos. McBaron does that to a number of them. And so, because of that, sometimes you got to keep the moisture content of the tobacco a little bit higher to make sure it doesn't delaminate after it comes out of the mold.
And how do they do that?
They just make sure that they put the top dressing on right before they put it into the mold.
There's
So the
no, there's
tobacco's
no, there's none of this thing called something glycol. None of that in there.
propylene glycol. I don't believe they use it at all. And the one way around using propylene glycol is to press the tobacco, because the idea behind propylene glycol, it's a humectant, and what it does is it equalizes the humidity. So if the tobacco starts to dry out and then there's a fair amount of humidity in the air, it'll draw the air out of, or the humidity out of the air and into the tobacco to keep it moist. So it has a much longer shelf life. Well, if you press the tobacco, the only part that's going to really dry out is the outside of,
Right.
of the brown block. The center is still going to stay moist. So they moisten it, they press it, and that's their method for giving it a longer shelf life rather than adding chemicals.
And this propylene glycol a no?
Propylene glycol is in food. You'll find it in a lot of food. You'll also find it in shampoos. But propylene glycol is here in the U.S. It's considered. They use the term GRAS, generally regarded as safe by the FDA, meaning that you wouldn't want to drink it, but used in small amounts for a specific purpose, it's not harmful.
Right. It'll only make you stupid.
Well, if you start out stupid, you don't have far to go. Um, so, so the propylene glycol will help keep the tobacco moist, but it also can be used in aromatics as a carrier. So
Okay.
you take your flavoring and you add it to the propylene glycol, and there may be other components in the mix. And then that's applied to the tobacco, and it helps the tobacco a bit to absorb the flavoring.
Okay.
Now, it's interesting because a lot of aromatics don't taste like they smell.
Right.
But Bob's chocolate flake in this particular case does taste like it smells. And that's because the flavor is pressed into the tobacco.
Okay. Okay.
So the more deeply embedded the flavoring is to the leaf, the more of it will come through when you're smoking it.
And how long has this blend been around?
Geez, I don't know, but I would guess it goes back to the 1800s, early 1900s.
Really, eh? Bloody hell,
I
man.
mean, some of the machinery that they use now it's all one factory. Samuel Gawith and Gawith and Hogarth are
Right, right.
together again. But some of the equipment that they use, the presses and stuff, are over 200 years old.
It's fantastic, man. If it ain't broke, man.
I would love to take a trip someday just to see the equipment.
I would love to take a trip there. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, I'll meet you. We'll get fish and chips and
That would be fantastic.
a couple of beers in a pub, and then we'll go over and smoke some tobacco.
Talk to your people there. Get in touch with me, and I can buy you your coffee every day. You know, I'm easy.
You know what the beauty of talking to my people about a trip like that is? I know what the answer is going to be.
What kind of bowl would you smoke Bob's chocolate?
I kind of would lean toward average to narrower chambers.
To narrower?
Yeah. I want to keep that smoldering nice and slow. It is primarily a Virginia blend, even though it doesn't nip as much.
Yeah, it doesn't.
But I would tend to go 5/8 to 3/4.
And you know, it's funny, eh? I don't have anything to ask you in terms of what kind of food, because this for me is a type of tobacco that it's just enjoyed on a clean palate for me.
Yep. So my suggestion to you there for a pairing would be a dry sparkling wine, because what you want is something to cleanse your palate between puffs so that every puff is fresh.
Like that.
So there are 3 things that cleanse your palate. Alcohol will cleanse your palate because it's a solvent. Effervescence will cleanse your palate because the bubbling kind of scrubs your palate. And then things that have tannins, like tea, will cleanse your palate. Well, dry wine has tannins. So a dry white wine that's a little effervescent would be a perfect thing to have with this because it'll keep your palate nice and fresh.
God, my mouth is watering, Russ. That sounds great. I'm probably gonna have some Bob's chocolate flake after this, man.
There you go.
What kind of person smokes this? What kind of person? An experienced person? Someone in the know, or someone? Can someone just doesn't know smokes Captain Black comes in and says, "Hey, I'll take a Bob's chocolate."
They will find something to like in it. It's going to have a little more nicotine than Captain Black, but it's not overpowering.
No.
But they tend to be smoked by more experienced people just simply because the more experienced smokers know what they are.
Yeah, right.
these are not prominent. If you're talking about prominent, you're talking about tobaccos in pouches that you might see in a drugstore if they're still carrying tobacco.
Mm.
But so they're going to see the Captain Blacks, half and halves, Sir Walter Raleighs, and
Right,
stuff
right.
like that. That's what most people are exposed to. It isn't until you get into it more and go to a dedicated brick and mortar store, or you go to a website like pipesandscigars.com. We've got the stuff, we know about it, but the average person might never see these Lakeland tobaccos.
Really, eh? And I remember once you stated a stat. You stated a stat.
I
You said
know,
that
I know where you're going.
you
Not
stated a stat.
about 95% of the people who smoke a pipe smoke aromatics.
95. That blows me away. So then, why, when a Samuel Gawith tobacco comes out, like, okay, the Bob's Chocolate is happening here. A couple of online stores have them sold out.
Well, yeah, because the quantities are really that small.
How small?
When we receive them, they may send us 30, 40 tins or
That's it.
bags. That's it. It's on allocation. We don't order it. The distributor understands that we'll take whatever they can send us. And when they get a shipment, they divide it among their customers, and they'll notify you and say, do you want it? And of course, the answer is yes.
Yeah, because it's a seller.
Yeah, and then it gets shipped out. Things seem to be getting better with Gawith and Hogarth. They're not there yet with Samuel Gawith, but Gawith and Hogarth has been better lately.
Yeah, but actually, I've seen Bob's Chocolate Flake online yesterday. It's still there.
Yeah.
And that's surprising because as soon as it came out, I'm one of these guys that always buys 2 tins, whatever. But when that came out, I bought 5.
When you go back 15 years ago, we always had those tobaccos in stock
I remember.
because people didn't know what the hell it was.
Ah, damn it.
Then the word got out and people talked it up on the forums and things like that. And production, unfortunately, wasn't that high. And so now all of a sudden it sells out.
Right.
So, that's today it's a much different situation. But 15 years ago, I if I wanted to, I could have gone over to the shelves in the warehouse and I could have grabbed a dozen bags of these tobaccos and bought them.
Yeah, I remember going to my brick and mortar like 20 years ago, and they always had Samuel Gawith. Always, always, always.
Yeah, and I wish I could go back in time because I definitely would have stocked up.
Yeah, I guess.
A lot of people seem to get this concept that I only smoke what I blend, and that's not true.
Well,
I
no, yeah.
I
Then why,
appreciate all kinds of tobaccos.
well, that's why we're having this show because none of these tobaccos are your blends. So for God's
Right.
sakes, you're well read in these blends, Russ. Plus the amount of money that I'm shipping to you every week, you study. But anyways, our last blend, and you know
Uh-oh.
what? It's our last blend, and I don't understand, and I really enjoy this blend. I don't understand why it is on the lower end of the money. This is like a less than $10 tin for 50 grams, and it's Sutliff's 1849. I enjoy this tobacco, but I mean that's not what this show is about. So, okay, what's in Sutliff's 1849?
Virginia and Perique.
So it's a vapor,
Yep.
straight ahead.
Yep. One of the first
Golden.
ones they did. In fact, Sutliff didn't do straight Virginia Perique blends, I believe, until that. And they had been making Virginia Perique blends for a while, before they came out with 1849. But that's the first one that they commercially sold. And the reason I say that is they had been making Virginia Perique blends for Hearth and Home for a number of years before that.
Before this 1849?
Yeah,
And why did they call it 1849?
because that's when their company was founded.
So this is their flagship tobacco then, if you think about it.
No, mixture number 79 is their flagship.
Is it still around?
Yep. It's a tobacco that's very divisive. It shares some characteristics to a degree with Lakeland's, but it's got a heavy anise note to it, which for a lot of people is a turnoff. But that's their flagship. But 1849, they came out with as their first tobacco in the flat vacuum sealed tins.
Okay. And I forget, it's a shag, no? I mean, it's a ribbon tobacco, right?
Yeah, it's a ribbon cut.
A ribbon, okay.
Red and bright Virginias and Perique. But, for probably 5 years before they came out with that blend, they were making our Hearth and Home Signature and Marquee blends, which includes Viparati and Louisiana Red in the Signature series and Virginia Spice. So, I'm not going to say that it's influenced by some of my tobaccos.
Well, I mean, I said that backstage. I said, "Hey, man, I had some Viparati, some 1849." I says, "Wow, they similar in note,
Yeah, well, the Virginias in both tobaccos are going to be fairly similar, and they're using the same Perique. The only difference is that Viparati has the fire cured burley added to it, which
so what that gives it a base. That gives it a base note.
Yeah, a touch more, and some sweetness, because the burley is cased with like a molasses or brown sugar.
Okay, yeah.
So it has a little bit more to it, but 1849 is it's kind of a benchmark type of Virginia Perique blend.
Really?
Yeah. To me, a benchmark Virginia Perique blend would have a mixture of Virginias and maybe about 10% Perique. And that's right about where I think 1849 is.
And why would they sell it for $9? It's not a seller?
No, but I mean, take a look at Sutliff's tobaccos for the most part. If they're not pressed, their prices are always very reasonable.
Okay.
Like the crumble cakes are in the same kind of tin, but they're more expensive because you got the labor in pressing, plus they have to be in the press for a while. So time is money. The longer the tobacco is being pressed,
the more you're going to pay for it.
The more you have to pay for it because it's sitting there not being sold.
That's right. It's like dry aged beef. You're paying for the time.
Yes.
By the way,
once again, I do not smoke dry aged beef in my pipes.
But talking about dry aged beef, have you had dry aged beef, like 4-month-old beef?
Oh God, yes.
God help us.
It has a depth and an earthy funkiness that it'll make your eyes roll back in your head.
Unbelievable. I could not believe it when I tried it. I remember we have a butcher here who's world class, Excuse me. And I see all this meat like rotting away, kind of thing, you know. And I asked the guy, "What the hell is that?" And he goes, "Well, that's wagyu sirloin." I'm like, "Oh yeah, is it good?" And he had no words. He just looked at me. He says, "You don't understand." So I said, "Okay." And I give me a steak, give me a 2-inch steak like that. And he says, "Oh, hold on, buddy. That's been there for hold on. That's been there for 4 months. You're paying for all the time that it's been there. So let's go down to 1 inch." And it was a T-bone actually. $50. I could not believe it. I was like, "Are you kidding me? $50." But Russ, once cook, I mean, and he says, cook it really quick on both sides and just salt and pepper. That's it. And it was tremendous.
Absolutely agree.
I had hazelnut flavor, a little bit of funkiness, like you say. I was going to say blue cheese. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah, to me, dry aged beef is the truffle of meat.
Absolutely.
Dry aged wagyu in particular. Well, what wagyu is basically Kobe beef, but not raised in Japan.
Yeah. So it's not as massaged as much.
Yeah, they don't massage them as much. I don't think they feed them beer over here.
Right.
They do in Japan.
Right.
And it has more marbling, which is flavor. And then when you dry age that and the fat loses some of its moisture, the flavor becomes more condensed.
Intensifies.
I mean, you'll never get a beefier tasting piece of beef than dry aged.
I mean, I was gonna say, too bad it's so expensive. Like you'd like to have it every day, but you don't want to have that every day. It's something else. And what they do, these guys, the odds and ends that are not sold, you know, they always cut off an end, so that's wasted. They make hamburger out of it. So we buy dry aged hamburger meat, and it's just that's the only way I can afford it, you know?
Yep.
So okay, so I guess we hit all the points on Sutliff's 1849. Hey, what kind of person smokes that? A guy who smokes vapors.
Yeah, definitely. If we're talking about amount of time that they've been smoking, this is probably something that I wouldn't smoke before 3 to 5 years into it.
Because of the Virginia.
Yeah. You've got to have your technique down to where you basically just keep the pipe smoldering.
Right.
If you puff on that blend, it's definitely going to nip you a little bit.
You're gonna get burnt.
Yeah. So you know, somebody who's had 3 to 5 years and gone through the stages and phases. You know, typically somebody starts smoking a pipe, the first thing that they smoke are aromatics. Then maybe they find the semi-aromatics, the burley blends, the half and halves of this world appeal to them. They're moving away from the heavy aromatics to something a little less aromatic, a little more natural. Then typically they move from there into trying Latakia blends because it delivers so much flavor.
Right.
And they smoke those for a while. And then eventually they try Virginias. And if by going through these phases, they've learned their technique well enough, they can get away with it. But I will bet you we've probably lost over the years 500,000 pipe smokers because they bought a pipe and they bought the wrong tobacco to start out with.
Yeah.
They don't have any technique. and they grab a straight Virginia.
God help them.
Their tongue doesn't recover for a week and a half,
Yeah, yeah.
and the pipe gets stuck in a drawer along with the tobacco, and they never touch it again.
You
You know,
know, I don't know if it's you that said this. I don't want to say it, but you said the evolution of a pipe smoker is like you said, aromatics, and then I'm gonna say English because he got a bit of that aromatic, the flower, and then you said, and then they grow up and they go into Virginias.
yeah.
Yeah.
And what I'm strictly referring to there
Yeah,
is developing the proper technique.
absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, I know people who have their pipe in their mouth and they never actively puff on the pipe at all,
Really,
but they breathe through their nose with the pipe in their mouth, and
right,
they leave their mouth cavity open,
right,
and the back pressure from when you exhale through your nose is just enough to create a slipstream in your mouth to draw the smoke in. Now, me, I'm kind of mindless when I smoke. I tend to put the pipe in my mouth and I'm doing other things. So I kind of puff without really thinking about it. If
right,
I'm
right,
concentrating on the pipe, I can do that breath technique.
right.
But if I'm doing other things, I'm just puffing.
But it's funny because that breath technique is even less than sipping, obviously, but because of the mix of air, the flavor is always there.
You'll get more flavor out of a Virginia if you use that technique than you will if you puff on it.
Okay, Russ, we're past our hour. I'm sorry, I don't pay overtime. Thank you very much, Russ, for doing this. It's always a pleasure for me to get together with you. I learned so much, and I always have a laugh all the
And
time.
just remember that probably 70% of what you're learning during these is wrong. So,
Okay, Russ. Well, thanks again, man. Thanks.
I'm glad to do it.
And that's it, Russ. Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so yep, that's that.